Alright, legends, welcome along to the show. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart, and we're getting on to the Zeppo, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 3, Episode 13. Excellent episode. This one here, I had almost totally forgotten about this one, but wasn't too far on it. It started coming back to me, and this is one where it's genius. And the way that it's played out, I really did enjoy this one. In this episode, there is this cabal of demon witches that are trying to bring about the apocalypse and open up the Hellmouth and the end of the world in a major way. And Buffy and the whole gang are panicking what to do, getting set up for this here. It's the biggest apocalypse. It's set up to be the biggest apocalypse and the biggest challenge that Buffy has ever faced. And she says herself in the show that I don't think this is too big for me to handle, more or less. So she's up against this time with a second Slayer and Faith. And yes, the dramatic element between all the cast, Giles, Buffy, all the main players, Angel, he's ready to sacrifice himself just to give Buffy a couple of minutes extra time to actually try and defeat this thing. That's what they're worried about, and it does make an appearance by the end of the episode. It's that giant tentacled beast that appeared in the final episode of Season 1, whenever the Hellmouth opens. They're getting prepared for that there. They have to face this thing again. But the genius thing is, this episode does not follow any of that. It ducks in and out of it every once in a while, but the main focus of this episode is Xander. And Zeppo refers to him in the episode. Essentially, at the beginning of this episode, they're fighting against these demon witches sorts of things, and they beat 2 or 3 of them, and because Giles has been kicked out of the Watchers Council, he hasn't got the connections anymore to get the right details for these things at this point. So yes, they're dusting themselves off. Willow's there. She uses a spell to, this demon witch has shrouded herself in this misty fog sort of a deal, and Willow uses her magic to get rid of this mist so Buffy and the rest of them can take out this witch. And as the fight is finished, they're dusting themselves off, and Xander picks himself up from underneath the rubble. He's had his ass handed to him one more time, and everybody throughout the episode is like, you know what, Xander, maybe you should try and stay to the back of the fight now on. Stop yourself from getting hurt. He's just been treated like a complete waste of space in this episode by everybody, essentially. Although most of his friends are trying to protect his feelings, look after him, like they've got his best interests at heart. But it is what it is. They're treating him like he's useless. And even Cordelia gets a couple of good digs on him on this episode. And in all fairness, as nasty as she can be to Xander, he brought that all on himself. So it's kind of hard to have any sympathy for the guy at the same time. It's a weird place for this character at this point throughout the run of the show. Yes, the whole thing of him and Willow cheating on Cordelia and Oz was just one of those things where I fall into the category of, I'm on Cordelia's side when it comes to Xander. He treated her like a complete and utter ass and deserves all he gets from her. So she gets some nasty little throw-ins to him in this episode, and she is very much entitled to do that. Buffy worries about his safety at the beginning of the episode. She asks him to stay out of the fight, and this upsets him. and he starts obsessing about what he can do to get some of this cool factor that everybody else seems to have. And he's talking to Oz about it, and he's like, Oz, you're in a band, that's like an automatic cool certificate and whatnot. What could I get? What could I do? And he decides he's going to go and get a car, and he gets this classic car from his uncle, and this is going to be a new thing to be the cool kid on campus. There's this guy on campus one morning. Xander's walking through, and he's trying to get these guys to throw a football at him. He's just trying his best to get involved in anything that he can, be included somewhere along the line. A lot of us has felt that in our early days in high school. Like a lot of us were the outcasts, and so you can kind of feel for him in this episode. But again, everything that he went through before that and everything that he'd done, it's kind of hard to feel sympathy for him at this point. I think that's a good point for this episode, is to try and bring a little bit of support in for Xander by the end of it. A student eventually throws the football, but Xander, being Xander, not being the real sporty type, manages to drop the ball, and it knocks the lunch out of a guy's hand. This guy is Jack O'Toole. Jack threatens to beat him up, and Cordelia makes her appearance. Having witnessed the event, Xander pretty much kisses this guy's ass to not get his ass beat, and she tells Xander that he's useless, and he's good for nothing, since all his friends are slayers, werewolves, witches, and watchers, while he's nothing. What have you got? Everybody else has all these elements that make them essential to the group, but you're just the donut boy, essentially. Meanwhile, Giles informs Buffy that the end of the world is near, and these witches, the Sisterhood of Ja, they're a group of fierce demons. They're planning to reopen the Hellmouth. We've already covered that shit. Yes, Xander gets his cool car and hopes it will make him useful and cool, but accidentally rear ends a car that Jack is sitting on outside the Bronze. After Xander gets off to a good start whenever he meets this girl who sees the car, thinks it's really cool, and she gets Xander to take her for a drive. So at the Bronze, Xander starts to realise that this girl's just one of these gold digger types that's into guys with cars, and the more fancy the car, the better. And because this is a classic car, it's the only reason she's there. But after Xander accidentally drives into the car that Jack's in, Jack gets out and they threaten Xander with a knife. Cop shows up, breaks it up, and Xander covers for Jack. This gains his respect, and they go to get the rest of Jack's friends. Yes, no surprise here. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. After all, it's going to go to weird places. And turns out all his friends are dead. And he goes to the graveyard and pretty much does a ritual to raise these guys from the dead. And then it just gets weird and silly at this point, because they're like the real high school jock types, and you're used to the vampires busting out of the ground in this show, and they're growling, they've got their teeth out. But there's one guy pops up, and his head comes up out of the ground from his grave, and he looks up at the people around him, and he's like, "Yeah, dude." So, there's a lot of good comedy moments in this. Buffy and Giles and Willow, they're back at the library researching, and Giles leaves to contact some spirits at the graveyard, hoping to get guidance from them. Xander meets Giles there. He sees him in the graveyard after the this doesn't work for Giles, and the spirits tell him to, pretty much slide on, leave us alone, don't be asking for our help again, more or less. And quite a few times throughout the episode, Xander's getting himself in deep with these guys. He's with this guy, Jack O'Toole, that's pretty much forcing Xander to be the driver for his gang in this episode. And once in a while, throughout the episode, Xander will go to some of the other people, such as Giles right here, and he tries to bring up the fact of what's happening, but Giles is so preoccupied with the end of the world, he kind of just brushes Xander off and just, stay out of trouble, more or less. And Xander turns and tries to sort things out himself in the episode. He even goes to Angel's mansion at one point, where at this point Angel and Buffy are having that massive conversation where Angel's ready to sacrifice himself to buy her some time to save the world and whatnot. All the dramatic elements are playing up. Every time you see someone out of the gang that's not Xander in this episode, it's blown completely up in the dramatic sense, and Xander's in the comedy sense, and it's very well done. I thought it was very good, this episode. So every time this happens, Giles, Buffy and Angel, each time Xander doesn't get a chance to let them know what's happening, and he even meets Willow outside the magic shop while she's getting supplies to do a protection spell for Buffy, and again, she's just like, she hasn't time to listen to him, and before she leaves, she gives him a hug and she says she loves him. So the stakes are high in this episode. And did it even cover Oz being the werewolf? This is happening in the full moon. This episode, he's changed. He's locked up in the library in that cage that Giles has for the weapons over there. That's never ever at any point throughout the series, there's never anybody in the higher ups of the high school that check the library and see this cage and it's full of all these weapons and stuff, and that's never questioned. Like a high school library full of axes and daggers and swords and stuff, and it's never, what the heck, what is this librarian actually doing here, but it is what it is. So Willow is the werewolf in this episode, and because he's right next to the Hellmouth, he's going crazy in there. As the werewolf, his senses are up, he can sense that something's coming, the Hellmouth's going to open, so they've no option but to get him out of the cage and put him somewhere else. So they tranquilize him, get him out of the cage, and they stash him somewhere else in the high school. And Willow's do you think he'll be safe enough there? And Giles is like, anywhere is safer than here right now. So Xander, Jack and his group of friends, they go for supplies at this hardware store, and yes, Xander's starting to panic now because he's now part of the criminal element, and he decides he's going to try and get out of there after finding out that the group offers him the chance to become a full member and get initiated into the group. This harkens back to an episode of the real Ghostbusters. It's just hit me from back in the day. There was an episode where there was these dead high school students, and the way that you were initiated into their gang was you had to die. It was the 80s. Cartoons are a little bit darker than what they are these days. But that's the thing here in this episode. For Xander to become part of this gang, he has to die. So the 3 members of the gang that were raised by Jack, they're obviously dead corpses, the skin's hanging off them and stuff. Jack's looks fine, but Xander questions this, why do I have to die whenever Jack's okay? And Jack lifts his shirt and shows these bullet holes in his chest and stomach, And he says he was killed in a drive-by 3 weeks prior, and it was his grandfather raised him from the dead. So Xander manages to escape, gets away from them, and finds Faith been attacked by a member of the Sisterhood, and he knocks this demon down with a car and rescues Faith, and they go and hide out in her hotel room, where she seduces him. She decides, okay, a fight to get there, all this adrenaline, I'm about ready to pop, and there was no satisfaction from the kills, so she's going to take it out on him. So yeah, Xander gets a go at Faith in this episode, and Jamie Beggar. Meanwhile, back at the library, well, she pretty much takes what she wants from him, kicks him out of the hotel room, so he's out in the streets again. Back at the library, Giles, Willow, they're getting Oz out. I've already covered that. Xander realises that Jack and the group have built a bomb. They were talking about baking a cake whenever they were going to this hardware store. And after Faith kicks him out, he checks the bags that's in the back of his car. Whenever he escaped, their supplies were in the car. They didn't get them back. And he realises they're making a bomb. So, yes, one thing leads to another. He decides to, and again, after looking for help from other members of the group, they're too preoccupied, so he takes it upon himself to try and stop these guys from doing whatever they're going to do with this bomb. He doesn't know where it's at, so he goes hunting them down, finds them walking the streets, and the car that he's driving is a convertible, and he grabs one of the members by the throat and drives off, dragging him along beside the car, and he's holding him up, and he's getting the information out of him. Where's this bomb at? And a mailbox takes the head off this guy as he's going down the street. It's a funny moment. Not so much of me describing it to you, but within the episode and the way that played out, it was very well done. Xander finds the bomb in the school basement, and yes, he takes out two of the guys in the group, accidentally, the first one. The second one, he manages to knock down a vending machine, crushes his head. That's the zombie element. You take the head off the thing, it dies. So yes, the last member, other than Jack from the gang, ends up getting taken out by these witches and the Sisterhood there within the school. They take out the last guy. Xander makes it to the basement, and tries to start disarming the bomb, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And of course, Jack shows up. They fight, and Xander positions himself between Jack and the exit door so that Jack has no hope of escaping before the bomb explodes, and it's a standoff between the two of them. At the end of the episode, Jack's like, I've got nothing to be afraid of. He's like, I'm already dead. Can you say the same? And Xander's pretty much, I enjoy the quiet. But he's like, you're dead. Your version of being dead is walking the streets and partying with your friends. This thing goes off and you're going to be dead, getting stripped off the floor by the janitor, sort of dead, and don't think you're ready for that. So by the end of the episode, you've got the countdown going there on the bomb. It's from the last 10 seconds. We get down to about 2 seconds, and Jack disarms the bomb. And yes, Xander then, he has the upper hand of Jack now. He's got no fear of him. And he walks up and he's like, I don't think I ever want to see you on campus again, Jack. And calmly walks out. And Jack, goes to another door to leave, and he's like, I'm not going anywhere, pal, more or less. And as he opens the door, the werewolf version of Oz jumps out, attacks him, and obviously kills him. So the next day, the bruised Buffy, Willow, Giles and Oz are sitting at a table on the campus discussing how they saved the world from destruction, and how nobody's ever going to know what happened or how close the world came to ending. And it was genius throughout that last sequence in the high school where the two stories are split completely in half, and coming up towards the end of the episode you're starting to see more of, like, well, throughout the entire episode you're seeing more from Xander's perspective than anybody else's, and you're only getting small little elements from Buffy and Giles, Angel, Faith, Willow in the episode. And yeah, that last sequence where Xander's getting chased through the school and he's trying to take out this zombie gang that Jack has raised. And every time you pass the library, the Hellmouth has obviously opened. This sisterhood has been successful in opening the Hellmouth, and you're seeing little elements of that fight between the Slayers against this giant demon that they've been worried about. And, you know, something as simple as, you know, they're running past the library and then the door bursts open and Buffy gets thrown across the hall, and she gets up and runs back and screaming, you know, Faith, go for the heart, more or less. So you don't actually see how they beat it or what happens. You just see them fighting this tentacled beast once in a while. But yes, Xander comes to sit with them at the end of the episode, and he's like, you know, can I help you out with anything? Can I grab you some donuts or whatever? More or less just dropping into his normal role of what he always did for the gang. And yes, Oz is like, no, I don't need anything. I'm oddly full this morning. So he's obviously eaten Jack as a werewolf and has got no memory of it. Yeah, Xander not knowing anything of their battle and them not knowing anything that happened with them. After a few seconds of talk, Xander decides to keep his night-long adventure to himself, aware that his friends will never believe the story, no matter how he tells it. And as he walks away, Cordelia once again appears to give him another few taunts and whatnot about how useless that he is. And Xander just smiles at her and walks away, quietly secure and confident in his place in the world, and realising that with or without Buffy, he can survive on his own. It is a great little episode, but you know, it's one of those stories where the Hellmouth opening and this demon coming up, you would kind of like to have seen the other side of that story play out, but to do it in this way, where it's just like the secondary thing to this other little story of Xander, it was very, very good, very genius. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, this is a far better season than I've ever give it credit for. You know, I've said it before, after the strength of season 2, season 3 had a huge boots to fill, and when I was watching it the first time round, I don't feel that I give it the chance that I should have given it back in the day. Like, you know, life was different then, I was a lot busier than I am right now, but sitting down to check it out now, I'm absolutely loving this series. So yeah, great show. That's going to do it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I will talk to you again on Friday evening with another little review of Friday the 13th. I think this one's part 5, A New Beginning. So I'll talk to you then. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.